evening, everyone. I now call to order the regular monthly meeting of the Burlington Electric Commission held on the second Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. here at 585 Pine Street. Today is November 12th, and we are starting at 5 o'clock. Let the records reflect that a quorum is present. Commissioners, you've received the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any proposed amendments? Okay. No objections are heard, then the agenda will be adopted as presented. Next, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. The minutes from our previous meeting held on October 8th have been distributed. We have two corrections to the minutes. The citations for the executive sessions noted the wrong citations and will be corrected to the following citations. The cybersecurity executive session should be cited as VSA 313A10. And the financial audit executive session will be cited as VSA 313A6. Are there any other corrections to the minutes?
Move to accept as amended.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? An abstention? Yeah, abstained. Okay, great. The motion passes with 4 approved and 1 abstained. All right. Next, we'll move on to the public comment period. And I'm just noting if there's any forms. Did you see that? There are no forms. Okay. First, I do want to note that correspondence was sent to the board clerk. Mr. Porter requested that the 2019 signed resolution for declaring a climate emergency and initiating a just transition for city staff be noted in the public comments. I will now open the floor for public comment, and if each speaker could state their name and limit their remarks to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone online? Okay. Seeing no one else for public comment period, we can move on to the monthly impact minute.
So we have Jen and Ita here with us, and Ita is going to make a presentation.
Of course. Hello, how are y'all?
Good, how are you?
How are you?
Good, good to see you again. Hey, Allie. Fancy spending more time with you this week.
I know.
So before I get in, I'm here today to present about a D grant that we received last year to produce 4 multi-language videos. Though we received $44,000 with an $8,000 contribution from our energy efficiency team, from Efficiency Vermont, and from Vermont Gas, to help us deliver these videos in multiple languages, 17 to 19 languages. I think some of y'all have heard a little bit of this spiel before. So far in this grant, we've produced 1 video with 3 other videos in different stages of production. The first video is about how to keep your home cool in summer and warm in winter. Some would call it a weatherization video. It's very weatherization heavy, but it really is about how a customer can think about how they are in their home. Like, we know that we're talking about weatherization, but we want the customer to think, what is how am I living in my home, and what are the needs that I need to fill in order to accommodate and keep what I want in my home to happen. So we produced that video, but before we get any further, before I'm able to answer any questions, I'd like to share a video with folks here in the room and our folks calling in from home. This is the first video that we produced that launched this other series of videos. My first 6 months here, we spoke to, we had hundreds of conversations with our customers to find out what do they know about how they get their electricity. And the questions they offered us ran the gamut. But what I realized as I was siphoning through that information is that we can answer most people's questions if we just explained what the heck is this bill all about. All those numbers, all those acronyms, all those little letters that shouldn't go together but somehow do. What is a KWH? It's a KWH, kilowatt hour, for those of you who don't know. All right, I'm going to share this video in English unless there are any other language. No? English it is.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. I just got you all excited, but I'm not really sure that I always know how to use Teams, so please be patient with me. Look at me.
Show you the amount of electricity you and your family use and how much it costs in your
Is it? Unmute on Teams itself.
I can do that for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Your Burlington Electric Department electric bill will show you the amount of electricity.
Oh, you know what it is?
Yeah.
Try it now.
And how much it costs in your home.
I'll make sure you all get a link.
To an electric outlet at home. Your bill might change when there are more people living in the house, as more electricity may be used. Also, when the weather is hotter or colder, and you use more heat or air conditioners. Your bill shows how much electricity you use one day over 1 month. Looking at the bill, you can see the changes in your use of electricity from last year to this year. KWH, or
Just about every single thing that we spend time talking about in this video is a direct result of conversations that we had with folks in the community. We spent a lot of time with consumers over at CVOEO. We spent a lot of time with consumers over at the Family Room, at AALV. We spent time in community gardens. And these are the questions that folks were asking. How do I know how much energy I'm using? Why does it cost this much? This is why we chose to answer what's in this video in this way.
kilowatt hours are how we count your electricity use. When you open your bill, you will see your name and your address. You have a customer number and a location number. You will be asked for these numbers if you speak to us on the phone to pay your bill. If you choose to pay your bill on your computer, you will need these numbers too. There are important dates on the bill. The bill date is the date the bill is sent to you. The reading period shows the dates of electricity use that you are being charged for. The please pay by date is the date by which we must receive payment. You can pay your bill in different ways. You can pay by check. You need to tear off the bottom part of your bill, fill it out with how much you are paying, and put the bill and your check in the envelope provided. Send it in the mail to us with correct postage. Do not send cash. You can bring your payment, along with your bill, to the Burlington Electric Department office at 585 Pine Street in Burlington. You can pay through your computer at our website. There, you will be asked for your email address and bank information so that money will be taken out of your bank account to pay the bill. Our customer care team is here to answer questions and help. We will always use an interpreter if you ask for one. We're open Monday to Friday. You can call us by phone Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. or you can visit us at 585 Pine Street from 8:30 a.m. until 4:30 p.m.
I forget how long that video is. If I'm not talking to folks. Okay. We, as I mentioned, we received this D grant. We have 4 additional videos. The first one, which I explained to you about. The other 3 videos, again, are in different stages of production. The script has been vetted by our tech team for cooling and heating. Think, you know, boilers, etc. And apparently it's too technical, so we need to, we're going back to the drawing board. We started that again today, rewriting the middle section so that it is more accessible. But ideally, that'll be ready by the end of the week. We have alternative transportation video script in production right now. The initial script has been drawn up and is being vetted by a few people in our BD. And the final video will be about household appliances. I can't imagine. I have 2 kids in college. I can't tell you the number of their friends that have come over to the house and are like, how do you use this? How do you turn on the oven? How do you keep this from burning? How do you use you name the appliance? People are still wanting some assistance, but our goal isn't just to teach people how to use appliances. It's how to identify whether or not your appliance that's in your home, particularly for renters, whether or not it's efficient. How do you have conversations with the property owners and property managers about how to identify replacement appliances, and how to go about having those conversations. Yeah, any questions?
Question. How are they going to be available? Are they going to be promoted or on the website, or can you use any of that funding to actually get them to people?
Thank you. That's a really great question, Allie. Upon completion of the 4 videos, which we're anticipating be completed by March of 26, we will start splitting up the videos into small segments so that they can be used as social media posts. We are planning an event to go along with some of our outreach, like ride and drive events, our energy clinics, we call them, where we're going to share with our partners. These are the videos. We have partnered with CVOEO already to vet the work that we're doing. So we'll continue to do that. And yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Whole outreach plan. Any other questions? Amazing. Thank you all for your time.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Great. Next on the agenda is the Commissioner's Corner. I just want to start by welcoming Brian Williams as a new commissioner. We're really excited to have you and excited you've joined the commission. So thank you for your service and thanks for joining us. The Commissioner's Corner is a time for any commissioners who want to make a comment or raise any questions. So any commissioners have anything they want to raise?
What, I just wanted to ask about, we just want to get some clarification of our use of executive session last month, and were we just in error on the specific state statute, but we're still legally fine?
Yeah, so it's just the citation was the wrong citation, but the sessions were still under the new citations that we are amending to. They cover the sessions that we held.
Okay.
I have a question. So the miscellaneous fees update I saw I didn't follow it at Board of Finance and City Council, but I saw what came back. So General Manager Springer, when you give your update, if you could give us a little sense of that would be helpful.
Yep,
Thank you.
will do.
I have a couple of requests for updates too, maybe that you can give in your update if possible. There's maybe 3 or 4. So the first one, the Valerity report, I'm wondering how the board will be integrated into that, or So I think that's question one that you could update us on. Two is that's the status of the IRP and plan for that, like how the commission will be integrated in that throughout the process. I know it's on our long-term calendar, but I'm just curious how to prepare for that. And I was also curious on the Connecticut rec RFP process. I think originally that the timeline was somewhere around now, so I was wondering where we're at with that.
Okay.
And that was it.
Noted.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else for the Commissioner's Corner? All right. Shall we move on to the General Manager Springer update?
Okay, let me start with the items that were not in the report, but that you just asked about, and then I'll jump through the items in the report. For the IRP, so we are still waiting on a PUC order related to our 2023 IRP, which some of the commissioners who were here previously may recall. We had two intervener litigants that created a significant amount of process in that docket. At a certain point, after multiple rounds of back and forth, BED moved for summary judgment, and that motion has been pending for a lengthy period of time right now. So we're waiting to get guidance on whether the 2023 IRP is approved, and what, if any, feedback there is from the PUC regarding that. Because of that, we've submitted a request to have an extension on the 2026 IRP timeframe, because normally we would be spooling up around now to do some of that work. We still intend to do some of the initial work that we would do, but we're looking to extend some of the timeframes by which certain things would be started at the PUC. So we're waiting to hear back, and once we get some sort of either a yes or a no on the extension request, we'll come back to you. I think typically the commission's been involved at several points where we develop the IRP, we give presentations at various kind of timeframes about what types of topics we're diving into and what type of analysis we're doing. We take feedback and questions from the commission. That becomes part of the process. There's usually a public meeting involved with it as well. So there's multiple points at which we might take feedback, but I'll keep you updated as soon as we find out what the time frame is going to be for the 2026 IRP. Also, with the Connecticut RFP, they sent out a notice with some questions, some basic framework questions. I think it was a month or more ago, and we submitted comments, as did the two intervener litigants in our IRP as well, I should note, and a few other power plants or that were affected submitted comments. I believe there's also two litigation cases pending in Connecticut regarding this statutory change, neither of which we're a party to at this point, but we're sort of monitoring them to see what the potential impacts are there. And we're waiting for the RFP, which has not yet been issued.
Oh, okay.
So we have not had a chance to see it or respond to it at this point. So those two were not on here. I'll touch on Valerity and miscellaneous fees in just a moment. Just wanted to highlight for the commission that in this room next week, on this day next week at 9 a.m. on Wednesday the 19th, we'll be here with Suncommon for a hybrid event, both in person and online, specifically aimed at commercial properties. So businesses, nonprofits, commercial property owners, commercial property developers, talking all about solar and the tax credit changes that have been made. And my understanding is, while unfortunately, due to federal policy, residential tax credits are going to be phased out, commercial credits may still be available, and there may be things people want to do to get commitments on the books before the end of the year to safe harbor against losing that tax credit. And if they're able to do that, their project can proceed over the next several years. And different solar companies have different approaches to this. We're partnering with Suncommon as an educational event. We obviously support solar with a number of different companies, but we're appreciative that they're willing to come and do a presentation and answer some questions for Burlington businesses and nonprofits. So please share the word if you know anyone who would be interested. We have information on our website. There's a Teams link from our website where people can get the RSVP information if they're interested. So we're excited for that.
General Manager Springer, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have a question related to the IRP one.
Oh,
Would it be
okay.
okay if I ask that now, or would you prefer?
Yeah,
if
let's
I
jump
waited
back to
till the
that.
end?
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. The one question I had is, we're in obviously late 2025, and so if we don't have an approved IRP for 2023, how does the department operate, and can you just, for us and for the public, explain what the sort of ramifications of that are?
Yeah, it's a good question. The IRP is a planning document, a guidance document, but it's not a decision document per se. It doesn't tell us we have to do X or we have to do Y, but it's meant to illustrate the way that we're planning and the way that we're thinking through and analyzing different aspects of our power supply. And the main consequence of not having an approved IRP is if you were going to have, if I recall, a 248 proceeding for, let's say, a major, some sort of power supply decision that did require PUC approval, there's a benefit to having an approved IRP. We're not in a position where that's had any impact because we don't have anything like that pending. That said, it would be nice to have the guidance and feedback on the analysis that we did in 2023 to sort of support, our thinking for how we might approach things in 2026. I also see that James has his hand, might want to chime in on this topic. James, go ahead. If you can hear me.
We can't hear
No,
you.
hold on. We're going to turn the volume up.
Not really.
Hang on one second. Try now.
Testing,
Better.
testing.
Better.
Okay. So the only reason, as Darren said, we would need an IRP, an approved IRP, would be potentially if we were seeking an out-of-state contract for non-renewable energy over 5 years or any resource over 10. Those are really the places where we need to be able to point to an approved IRP. Even then, there is a way around that too, but we don't have any plans for that right now. We would also, as Darren said, it's a decision-making document, and the only thing that's approved in an IRP is how you make decisions. So we would continue to use the decision-making framework we laid out in the 2023 IRP, updating variables and things as necessary. In fact, we're talking about doing that right now while looking at other power contracts and use it that way. So again, we do have an ability to proceed with most things without one.
Thanks,
And
James.
frankly, any decision that was discussed in the IRP is not actually approved as a part of the IRP. Any decision talked about in the IRP continues to have any approval requirements that it would otherwise have. So it's really just laying out for the regulators how you make your decisions. And we can continue to operate as we have in that respect without having the approval for the 2023.
Thank you.
There's been some discussion of maybe having longer timeframes between IRPs, and we're interested in that too. But that would require
Now,
a statutory change at some point.
And honestly, if you filed an IRP today and it was approved 2 months from now, but your variables that you included in it were no longer accurate, you would be expected to update them before making any decisions anyway. So even that's not a different proceeding. So, looking at resources today, the resource values or the variable values we used in 2023 may not be accurate anymore. And we have to consider that too. Anyway.
Any other IRP questions? Okay. Okay, so moving on from the solar item back to Valerity. So our expectation is Valerity will have a final report ready for the November 25th TUC meeting, and certainly commissioners can listen into the TUC meeting or view the recording after the fact. I know we can't have more than 2 of you present officially. You could certainly watch on the town meeting TV without being present in the meeting if you'd like, or you can review the recording. My expectation is that we're going to need a little time at the BED side to kind of review the analysis and see where it leads, but I think we'd be prepared to offer reflections on it at the December meeting, certainly like which items that they've flagged in their report, which will be available obviously by that point for your review as well, are of great interest to us in further discussions. I think some items may be of less interest for reasons of cost or other things. So we'll be looking at that. I don't know that we had a budget plan with Brad and Valerity to come back and present here separately. I think the other option would be if if the commission wanted to, we could try to have a joint commission 2 meeting on the 25th. But I don't know if that's more process than you're interested in. But happy to share that with Chair Barlow if it's helpful.
Anyone interested in that? Is there,
It's November 25th?
That's correct. Or that's my understanding of the date. I don't know that there's a time locked in as of yet.
or there could be,
I'd be interested if, yeah, we can
so
consider
the
that.
options would be potentially have, just report back.
Yep.
Have some, one, or two representation at the, or just attendance at the two.
Right.
Or for us to call a joint meeting. And I think, so it sounds like a minimum, it would be, attendance. Does anyone want to?
If there were 2 commissioners interested in joining, and it would not be an official meeting, obviously, we wouldn't have a quorum of the commission.
Right.
You could be there
Right.
for that.
Is the meeting typically midday? I don't know.
Not always. Most of the time, it's around 5 o'clock, but because it's the week of Thanksgiving, I'm not sure if they may move the time around, so it's conceivable. I should be able to get some more information by tomorrow. But typically, they've been around 5:30. Typically, they're over next door at the 645 Pine building. And also, obviously, online as well.
I might be the only one interested, so maybe we go with, we attend if we can.
And then we can
That
certainly
sound
have
good?
a,
Up to 2, and we
Right.
can communicate.
I think that sounds like sounds like that, a plan for this one. I think there's been various interests in different ones at different times, but for this one, potentially, that sounds like the best solution.
and then we can provide some further reflections in the December meeting
That's
because
great.
we'll have had a couple weeks to digest the information at that point as
Thank you,
well.
Commissioner Kenny for going and engaging in that.
I will update you when I know the time as well. So for any commissioners
Thank you.
interested, you can join.
Thank you.
Very good. Regulatory update. Wanted to provide just an update on a few key regulatory proceedings. The business process review docket. The next deadline is November 19th. The department is supposed to share a draft RFP for the business process review scope, at which point we would have our first opportunity to make any kind of formal comment in that docket on the substance, and we'll be able to offer thoughts once we review that. So we should see that on November 19th. Also in that docket, Pike Porter, who was the intervener litigant in the IRP 1 of 2, and also had filed comments at the Connecticut RFP question, had submitted a motion to intervene, which was opposed by BED and the Department of Public Service, and that's pending. That's all the process in that docket as of right now. There's another docket related to district energy spending between 2021 and 2023 that we've had some process in. There's a scheduling conference tomorrow, and we and the Department of Public Service, or actually the department submitted, and we agreed with a schedule that would have us submit additional testimony in response to PUC questions by early December. Department can serve discovery if they would like to after that, and then they would file responsive testimony in kind of mid-late January, and then hopefully we would be on a path to getting greater clarity on that docket. And the other, well, there's a bunch, but of different things going on, but the other one that I'd call your attention to is the demand resource plan, which is our 3-year budget and planning process for the efficiency utility. That's going to be continuing into January. This is for the 2027 through 29 timeframe. There's some big issues up for discussion, including how and whether heat pumps continue to be part of the efficiency program, what opportunities there are for further kind of discussions there. The overall trajectory is such that the efficiency budget, based on the potential, seems to be shrinking over time. And so we're looking at things like the Efficiency Modernization Act, which lets us use at least a portion of those funds for innovative programs to be extended at the legislature. And we've made that request in testimony just as recently as late October before the House Digital Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee, which was holding a hearing on federal impacts of different funding and policy changes at the federal level. So it's a no-cost extension, doesn't raise any revenue, doesn't change any revenue, continues to give us flexibility. And if it's granted, one of the things we'd like to do, this kind of goes into the miscellaneous fees update, is propose a new program for income qualified customers to receive assistance with a panel upgrade if it's needed for electrification. So my hope is that if we can get this program extended, that could be one of the new things that we do with it in 2027. So going back to miscellaneous fees, so we were originally at the Board of Finance, and the item got held over because of concern. You know, they had voted to approve it previously, got held over due to concerns that were raised around particularly the new service fee for, you know, meters that were being pulled and then reinstalled, and we have to roll trucks for that. We haven't had a fee for that. We talked with several counselors who expressed concerns, and the upshot was it was ultimately approved at the Board of Finance and City Council unanimously on November 3rd, with the proviso that when we file at the PUC, we request that the fees not go into effect any earlier than essentially April. Note, you know, it says March 31st, 2026, but it would essentially be April. I'm not clear that that's a different time frame than we would have otherwise in submitting this at the PUC. But the idea was we want to give customers time, if they have a pending project that they weren't aware of these fees, to advance that project to completion before the fees would take effect. So we will communicate to customers. You know, we've talked, Mike is going to work with our team on Bill Message and Front Porch Forum and other things. We're also going to work with Bill Ward's team to make sure we're sharing the message to property owners like Alan, who's been here, about the fee change that's positive in their case. So we expect that, you know, we'll file at the PUC in the coming weeks. Is that fair, Emily? Weeks. But we'll do so with the proviso that we'd ask that they not have them be implemented prior to that date, per our instructions at the Board of Finance. Let me pause there and take questions if there are any on that subject.
Just one. If it's was approved by the council, what was that date? It was the last meeting.
November 3rd.
November 3rd. Okay, so
Yep.
a couple weeks ago. What needs to happen between that approval step and then the filing in a couple of weeks?
We've been consulting with the Department of Public Service, and we have to kind of re-prepare the filing, the formal filing that goes into the PUC, because we had submitted and withdrew it. So it's next few weeks. I think it'll be ready to go.
Thanks.
Question, I'm like rushing to try to read on it. So what is it? The Energy Efficiency Modernization Act is under threat, you're saying, and so you testified to keep it in place, and how would that affect?
It's actually, it's a 3-year pilot, essentially, from the 21 through 23 timeframe that got updated and extended for 24 through 26. So if nothing happens,
So
it
would
sunsets.
go through the end of 2026.
And we're arguing to extend it
And
further.
what would be the loss if it doesn't extend?
If it doesn't extend, we would lose the ability to use a portion of our efficiency funds for emission reduction projects. That's been funding our geothermal test well program, our multifamily EV charging program. That's been boosting our heat pump and EV incentives. And it also limits our ability to use the TEPF funds that are mainly for oil and propane customers, of which we have very, very few, for more innovative purposes.
Okay.
So, you know, for example, the EV announcement we made with the mayor recently, where we were able to say, now that the federal credit has been expired, we're going to essentially double, or a little more than double, our credit to help the marketplace, you know, help our customers. That's only possible because of the Efficiency Modernization Act, letting us use our TEPF dollars more creatively. And absent that authority, we wouldn't be able to do that, and those incentives would revert to lower levels, for example. So it would have a material impact on Burlington customers. But we're hopeful that we can advance an extension.
I just want to commend you on the low-income panel upgrade assistance potential. I think that's I think we've talked about that here, but
Yeah.
it's just such a barrier once you're looking for some kind of replacement to then also have to do the full panel upgrade. And
Agreed.
so I think that's a great,
Our
great.
thought was maybe it would offset some of the increased fee for customers who are in that position as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the last thing from me is just to note that we had a few different events since the last commission meeting. We had a press conference with the governor, Efficiency Vermont, VGS, the Department of Public Service on weatherization, Button Up Vermont, that was held in Burlington at a home next to a home that was being weatherized. So you could see the attic insulation being installed by Energy Co-op of Vermont. And we also were part of an affordability panel at the Renewable Energy Vermont conference with other utility participants. And we had myself and Jen Green were at the Energy Action Network Summit on November 5th. And we had some discussion there about kind of further options for clean and affordable transportation, in particular EVs, that were of interest and align well with this Efficiency Modernization Act extension idea. The last thing I had, which I actually was going to have Mike come up for, is you all had asked for some additional reflections on the customer survey, and we've had some further deliberations on that, and Mike has a few slides to share relative to that.
With me one moment. There we go. All right. Just a few updates for you folks based on what we heard as what are some of the takeaways and action steps from the report last time. Since we met in October, the executive team met as well as our expanded communications team to review the survey results and see, well, other than the metrics that we report to the PUC every 3 years, what are some takeaways and what are some action steps that we can take more immediately? And so, that's not moving. There we go. Okay, so some takeaways. In this survey, we had more homeowners than renters. And of course, renters have very different needs than homeowners. And we learned that many fewer renters are taking advantage of rebates. They have fewer opportunities because they're not paying for heat pumps and appliances in their rental unit. They're really only taking advantage of portable items like a window AC or a dehumidifier, which is even rare because usually they're in basements and people don't necessarily have basements. But we talked about how can we create entry points for renters to benefit more from rebates, particularly around electric vehicles and air conditioners. And with EVs, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges, but it comes from if they're in a multi-family unit, is there a charging apparatus nearby through their landlord? Are some of our drop-down chargers in the vicinity? Of course, our next survey is not until fiscal year 2028, but we already have some good ideas for how to start our work earlier to be able to get more out of the survey. And one thing we want to do is come up with a way to make sure we're not only surveying more renters than homeowners, but segmenting the questions we ask so we can learn more specifically about renters and be able to drill down on the very different needs of the groups. But a couple really interesting takeaways. I'll show you some of these numbers regarding renters and then homeowners. One huge takeaway was even though we're communicating through lots of different channels, not enough of our customers, be they renters or homeowners, know about our rebates. And so you can look segmented at the different category of rebate from EVs down to induction cooking stoves. And the first column is the number of renters who said, I didn't know about this. I didn't know this rebate existed. And then the percentage of renters. So you'll see that the numbers, the percentages of the renters we surveyed who didn't know are pretty high, up in the 60s, up in the 70s. And we want to take steps to change that. Additionally, homeowners didn't necessarily know about rebates as well. The question that we had asked, have you ever participated in BD's energy efficiency programs, including weatherization, lighting rebates, or efficient appliances? And these are a little different than our electrification rebates. But the no column, 257 of the homeowners who said that they haven't participated. And then this last one, if you own a home and you've not participated in the programs, we had different categories of why didn't you participate. and one was unaware of rebates. So 93 of the 257 who said no also said they were unaware. So 36% of those folks said, I wasn't aware. So big takeaway is we need to do better to make folks aware. And how can we do it? We can use customer segmentation intelligence to more effectively communicate with different groups of people where they're getting their information. And we've traditionally used BED, the bill itself. There's a message on the bill, the inserts. Publications like Front Porch Forum, 7 Days are most popular, and they still are, but we're noticing that more people are getting their news from Digger as well as Vermont Public. So we can start using those channels as well. Another takeaway was there were definitely financial challenges that our customers were sharing with us. One, which folks have heard about, is this $3.50 bill pay fee. The good news is, I'm going to jump right to that action step, is with our new payment portal, the fee is likely to be $1, and that's a big difference. You know, $3.50 fee when somebody's bill is $30. If you do the percentage, it's pretty high. So stay tuned. That should help folks. Customers, of course, expressed dissatisfaction about rate increases, and also particularly with commercial customers, there were definitely circumstances, whether they be economic or community-driven, that are diverting our commercial customers' attention away from taking advantage of efficiency and electrification opportunities. Some of our largest institutional customers we're finding lately haven't had the capacity to focus on that. Fewer companies to this end fewer of our commercial customers are actually asking us about rebates and asking for technical assistance when they're reaching out to us. In 2022, 3 years ago, when we did the survey, almost 44% of our commercial customers were inquiring. That went down to about 27%. So it kind of tells us that there are factors impacting this, and hopefully we can get the word out better, and hopefully the scenario that's keeping some of these customers from focusing on that will get better. And then just a couple more quick slides. Just gave you a little information on EVs and then heat pumps to follow. Some takeaways. Some good news. More customers own electric vehicles now than in 2022. And we found that the price of electric vehicles is less of a hurdle. You'll see in 2025, it was about 37% compared to 47% 3 years earlier. Also, we have our off-peak charging rate, and we've doubled the number of electric vehicle owners who are on that rate. It went from about 22% to almost double, so 43.2%. The biggest reasons, biggest reasons folks are not moving to electric vehicles or driving electric definitely had to do with charging station accessibility, whether it was public charging stations, availability of level 2 and 3 chargers, or lack of home charging infrastructure, and as I mentioned earlier, particularly for renters. So we're trying to identify the market better so that we can convince customers to still go electric even though federal incentives are going away. And one way we did that was with our recent announcement to use some of those TEPF funds to increase the amount of the rebate. And again, a lot of this is about communicating with our customers to be able to take advantage of the opportunity. And then with heat pumps, we did find that more customers know about heat pumps and have received rebates, so that's good. Some of the biggest hurdles are still the fact that 60% of our customers are renters. Landlords don't necessarily have incentives to install heat pumps because the renters are paying the electric cost. The expense is a hurdle for folks with electric panel service upgrade costs, and Darren mentioned some ways we might be able to help with that in the future. And also, even for folks who, a reason people gave for why not an EV yet, why not a heat pump, was often, I'm waiting for my current car to need to be replaced or my current heating system to need to be replaced. But the reality is also that to take care of space heating needs, a lot of homes will still need to replace a legacy system in addition to a heat pump. A heat pump might not be able to do it all. We have 1,500 existing homes with heat pumps, and the number that Energy Services cites is generally they're about 30% of our homes in general need weatherization work. And so we still want to continue our VGS partnership on cost sharing to weatherize folks' homes, especially when they have heat pumps as well, to make sure they're as efficient as can be. And we're also, and Jen Green, who was here earlier, brought this to our attention. There's a mayor's group looking into ways to find alternatives to having to upgrade electric panels. For instance, the Department of Permitting and Inspections in Burlington has a way potentially to follow rules which would allow a greater load to be on an existing panel. We're seeing if that can be increased and still follow the rules. And also, are there some load shedding technologies so that people can get more out of their existing panel? And those were the key action steps after the takeaways. And I'll stop there and see if anyone has any follow-up questions.
I have an initial one. I'm curious about, I'm trying to remember Chris's last presentation about commercial, like how you're doing towards goal, because I'm that number of 40s to 25% of commercial customers knowing about programs. Just curious about any, it'd be interesting to hear in the next quarterly update from Chris on efficiency portfolio progress. I'd be interested to hear if there's something more action oriented steps that, I mean, if it's not if you're managing it through a more mass media campaign, and that's the tactic that seems most effective, that's great. But I'd be curious about it being more, I'd assume a lot of those commercial customers be account managed, or you at least know them pretty well. So that just seems like an astonishing drop.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest concern I've seen from our efficiency filings is actually with business new construction.
Yeah.
What, typically is a significant portion of our program. Somebody's building new and we're going in and trying to incentivize them going above code and all the different things. And we haven't seen as much new construction activity as I think that was anticipated.
Sure.
So I know that's been a barrier. It's not exactly the issue you're pointing out here. And I do think that overall we've been struggling to reach some of those metrics with the efficiency program.
Right.
This is certainly one barrier that we can address potentially is knowledge of the program. And we do have strong relationships with the medical center, with the university. We have dedicated efficiency staff who spend time, as well as with the city. And those are some of the three biggest, entities from an energy use standpoint. But yeah, there's some other challenges, obviously, with getting the word out about some of the different things that we can do. I mean, I've seen that in every survey we've done in various ways. And it's always a great frustration of mine that more people don't know about the programs that we're offering. So we have to continue to be repetitive and innovative with how we use our outreach channels.
Does that commercial category involve everybody from the likes of a UVM down to a random small store in Burlington?
Yes.
Maybe. So it's a big collection of diverse
That's right.
types of businesses.
Yeah, that's right.
I have a comment/question. Thank you for doing that. That's extremely helpful. And hopefully it was helpful for you
Oh, for
doing that
sure.
process. And I just had, it's kind of a question and a thought from personal experience as a landlord and someone that people go to for advice on heating and things like that, because I'm a nerd about it. I see time and time again that plumbers and HVAC folks, when you get multiple quotes, they're not recommending electrification. They're speaking out against heat pump water heaters because they're too loud, too big. They're still recommending gas equipment that's almost always oversized. They're recommending, if they do say a heat pump, it's almost always oversized. How are you thinking about the importance, or is it showing up in the survey? Because my mother, family, everyone is like, well, my plumber told me this. And so I'm wondering if that's a factor that you're seeing and how to address what seems to me as most people trust the person that comes in, even if they get 2 quotes to do what they tell them, even though they know there are rebates available, they just assume that's not good for their house.
Right. Well, a few things we try to do. We have a preferred dealer network with EVs and heat pumps. So we have a place on our website where we let folks know about contractors that we've worked with and understand are kind of doing right by the community. We also communicate that our efficiency team is available to help our customers understand what their quotes are looking like, try to make apples to apples comparisons from quotes they may get that are hard to really decipher and figure out. So we do try to provide that opportunity for our customers. We at times have had meetings with contractors to make sure they understand what we do offer and encourage them to talk about our rebates. But you're right, some have their own method of operating that works for them, and they'll follow that path despite what we might share. But there's probably more we can do to try to continue communicating with those contractors and try to help them be more aware of what's possible for their customers.
Yeah, it seems just like such an important influence on folks that
Yeah.
it's just getting for direction.
This is also a real key issue for that demand resource plan, because we've had a midstream, what we call a midstream incentive through the efficiency program in partnership with Efficiency Vermont for things like heat pumps. And it goes to the installer distributor to make sure that they're giving the customer the correct cold climate, most efficient equipment. But it also serves as kind of a market making incentive for that distributor or installer to carry that equipment, talk about the equipment with the customer. And that's what's at issue right now, is that there is a recommendation, at least on the table in that proceeding from the department, that maybe we get rid of that program. And we and Efficiency Vermont have been arguing that it has a lot of benefit and that we'd like to retain it. So that'll be one of the live issues, I think, up for discussion. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
It's everything from me.
Okay, great. All right. Moving on to financials.
Hello, good evening. I'm Emily Stebbins-Wheelock. I'm the CFO and Manager of Strategy and Innovation. I'm going to talk about financial results for the month of September. In September, we had an actual net income of $2.1 million as compared to a budgeted net loss of $753,000. As we discussed last month, we had a variation in the timing of our power supply revenues, our renewable energy credit revenues. They were budgeted to be delivered in August. They were not delivered until September. So we had a big negative variance in August, and we have a large positive variance here in September. That's the major factor contributing to these results. Sales were up very modestly by $75,000. On line 3 in power supply revenues, you can see that variance there of $2.575 million. That compares to budget for that delivery period, which was $3 million. So it's under budget in terms of what we expected to be taking in. All of that variance is due to lower McNeil production in past periods. So we had fewer RECs to sell than we had projected to have to sell at this time. And then moving down to expenses, net power supply expense had a positive variance of $122,000. as usual, lots of puts and takes within that line. McNeil ran more than budget, so we had an unfavorable variance on fuel. The GT testing also occurred in September, so we had higher fuel usage for the gas turbine as part of the R99 testing. Running McNeil more helped with purchase power because we had to melt more to sell. Wind was under budget. Winooski Hydro was severely under budget because of the drought. And then we have our first light hydro contract that was also under budget because of low water in Connecticut as well. So we did purchase a short-term hydro contract from Brookfield to try to make up the difference with Winooski 1 and First Light being down. Transmission was slightly favorable. So all of those things happening within that $122,000 variance. All other operating and maintenance expense was pretty much right on budget, very small positive variance of 86,000. Small variation in depreciation and taxes. And nothing significant happening in other income or interest expense. So that brings us year to date. We have an actual net income of just under 1.7 million. We had budgeted at this point to be at 1.25 million, so we're about $500,000 better than budget at this point in the year. Questions before I go to the next page?
I have a question. What percentage of power supply revenue are RECs?
All of it.
All of it, 100%. And
Yeah.
then my
Easy
other
one.
question, and this relates to GM Springer was saying about how like demand has gone down since the 80s. I think you were saying last time. How are you thinking about that in a long-term planning perspective of because I noticed sales to customers are down. It might be a totally different reason per budget, but like, how are you thinking about that as a utility as sales to customers are ideally going to decline over time?
So
Maybe if efficiency improvements continue to happen.
right. So so sales to customers on kilowatt hours sold basis, energy sold,
Yeah.
have been flat to declining over
Yeah.
time. And strategic electrification is good for the climate, but it's also good for our business model because of that. Because as efficiency sort of eats into sales growth, and as we've lost major manufacturers, think Blodgett, think Specialty Filaments, think Coffee Cup, right? Those have been big customers that we no longer have, who are not using energy. And meanwhile, we have all the poles and wires out there that we ever had, right? So you are kind of stuck, kind of taking care of a big fixed cost infrastructure as capital and construction costs rise, the cost of materials rise, and then you're selling, the same amount of energy year over year. So what has to give there? Rates, right? That will force or contribute to pressure to raise rates, right? So electrifying everything, while also good for the climate because of our renewable energy supply, helps to increase sales, which for a good reason, which helps to keep rate pressure lower than it would otherwise be.
Great. That's a
Okay,
Yeah.
so your question was, how are we thinking about that over the long term? When we do the IRP, a big component of the IRP, and it's something that we engage a company called Itron to do for us every year, but every 3 years as part of the IRP, we engage them to do a long-range forecast of sales and energy sales and demand. So energy sold is kilowatt hours. Demand is the highest demand on the system at a single point in time. Okay, so you could have sales be flat to be declining, but you could have demand actually be higher depending on the nature of who's using energy at what time and what amount, if that makes sense. So demand is important when you think about the size of the system that the engineering department has to plan for in terms of how many electrons do we need to push across at a given time, how big do transformers need to be, how big do wires need to be, that sort of thing. And so the forecast that Itron will do is important, and it's a lot of back and forth and data sharing of historical data. It's trend based like any model, But then we try to build in the things that are newer that we have less long-term data on, like EV adoption, heat pump adoption, the big one, which we were just talking about, commercial customer participation, right, in electrification and flex load management. So those are definitely harder to model and project. And when we do that IRP load forecast, we do kind of a base case and a high and a low scenario, so we can see kind of the variability between sort of different views of how things go. So it's, I would say, something that, it's hard to say exactly like why sales have been up. They were up compared to budget last fiscal year. They've been up for the year to date. Is that weather? Weather can cause $1 million variance, weather alone, right? How much of that is underlying load growth that we were just conservative in modeling when we did the budget, but actually those EVs and heat pumps are helping us more than we thought, or not, right? It's quite hard to tease that apart.
Thank you so much. That's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Happy to. All right, I'll go down to the next page. Capital spending through September, 10% of the budget overall. Some notes on timing. Transformers are still outstanding, not being delivered. We did make our Velco equity investment in September, so that's showing on the transmission line. And then cash was stronger than budget. We had 15.2 million. In September, we had budgeted to be about at 14 million, so about 1.2 more than budget, which is good. And then these credit rating factors at the bottom, the first one is required by our revenue bond debt covenant. We have to be at 1.25 on that debt service coverage ratio. We're at 4.57. The adjusted debt service coverage ratio is the one that Moody's looks at when they do our credit scorecard. We're at 1.16. And then cash coverage is another thing that Moody's looks at. If you include the line of credit, we're at 159 days cash on hand, and without the line of credit, 81. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, I did have one more question. Sorry. The strategic chart, that's on your section, correct?
The dashboard?
The dashboard. No, I ask about this every
Yes,
time.
I was waiting for it.
I was like, wait, I just snoozed for a second looking at those numbers. I think I can't get to the page. What number is it?
18 of the PDF,
18.
or 17 and 18.
17 and 18.
Mm-hmm.
I still am struggling with the net zero roadmap goals in the 2024, and then a lot of them not having year to date, but their annual goals. Is there a way to try to update that in the next month or two to just have like a year to date column? Because I find like I look at it has each month of 2025, for example, but sometimes they're measured. This is for the whole dashboard, but they're measured on an annual target, but then there's not a summation line for year to, like, you can't really tell progress. And then on the net zero energy goals, they say 2024, but then they're not tied to the actuals above. So I just find it hard to understand how we're doing.
Okay, so for the net zero ones, we're reporting on the actual number of activity in the month. The target, so what, we don't have like an annual, how am I trying to say this?
You don't.
Well, we do actually. Okay, so let's take the first one, number of residential heat pump installs, right? We had 24 that actually happened in October. Okay. And then what's the goal for that? Residential heat pumps for space heating. Oh, I see. 12. Yeah. So those really should be
Where's the goal?
2025 goals. Yeah, I actually did this update this. I just didn't update it enough. So thank you for
Yeah, I think
keeping
a
that.
column that sums it to year to date and then the target would be helpful.
Uh-huh.
Because I find myself trying to like do math on the side.
Okay.
And then I just don't because I get confused.
Yeah, I'll take a look
and
at
I
that.
think that year-to-date column would be helpful because even on the other, a couple of the other pages, there's a fair amount of annual ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then you show all the other yearly actuals and they're like far to the right, but then there's not just the year-to-date actual. So it's hard
Right.
to see.
As long as it's clear that year to date is potentially never going to be close to the target until the year is over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
right.
80% of.
Yeah.
to-
Okay.
Yeah.
Just as long as that's understood, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's easy to do.
thank you,
Mhm.
appreciate it. And you can, then I won't ask that question again next
No,
month.
I'll be ready for next month. It's good. It's good.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think just on that point, the net zero roadmap goals are extremely ambitious. So we may, if we're reporting against those, like I think you'll see consistent challenge in meeting them. But there's another metric here that I also think is really relevant along that kind of line, which is the percent of tier 3 program met with measures. That's right above the gray shaded net zero roadmap goal piece on page 17. So just for context, that's the state renewable energy standard electrification program goal. And our goal is to meet and exceed that every year by as much as we possibly can. And so you can see, if I'm reading it right, we're at 170% as of October, partly due to a really significant custom project that looks like it came in July. But that's another kind of tracking mechanism that could be relevant because it's an actual state requirement, whereas the roadmap is incredibly important, but also incredibly
And
ambitious.
is it incredibly ambitious on an annual basis? Or
Yes.
on a 2030 basis?
Because it
Okay.
ramps to 2030.
Right. To get there, you have to be ambitious
Right.
every year.
Which I think is understood. You can even note it. I love in the other financial pages how you always have the letter or the number or letter, whatever you use to just say why. I think that's helpful too.
Yep.
It could be like asterisk, this is highly ambitious because almost every long-term climate goal is no matter what organization you're in. And like this was good and like this is down because of that. Like that is so helpful in your other finance sections.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yep.
Thank you, Emily. Okay. Next, we have the financial internal controls.
Moving in for a little bit. All right. So hopefully you saw we issued our financial statements for fiscal year 25 yesterday. So this is kind of in supplement to that presentation that I'm going to do next. But essentially the internal controls I'm going to go over tonight kind of set the foundation for how we get our financial statements to be accurate, timely, and complete to present to you monthly and also to complete this big accomplishment of issuing our audit. So with that in mind, I can advance these slides. There we go. So what we base our internal controls on is this thing called the COSO framework. It's kind of like an accounting generally used framework. Like it said up here, the purpose is to design, implement, and evaluate internal controls, assisting to minimize errors, fraud, and mismanagement of resources. So we focus on all three of those areas, the biggest being fraud, because that's really something that we can focus on making sure doesn't occur, and with the help of the 5 components listed on the slide, and we'll go in each of those, so I won't read them off quite yet. And then before we touch on those different 5 components, I wanted to just throw out this concept that's commonly used in accounting. I think I first heard about the fraud triangle in one of my first accounting courses in college. But essentially, it's the three pillars that somebody essentially has to have to commit fraud. One of which being incentives or pressures. So that's kind of, if we achieve this certain metric or we achieve this outcome, what do we get out of it? Have a pressure to get to that outcome. The second one being attitudes or rationalization. An example of this is, I can commit this fraud because I deserve it. I do this other thing that kind of makes up for this fraud. And then the third one, which a lot of these controls examples that I'll go through, is opportunity. So does someone have the opportunity to commit this fraud undetected without those checks and balances of someone else checking their work or having a hand in what they're doing? So those are the three areas that we kind of keep in mind when we create the controls to try to mitigate each of those. So the first of the 5 components is called the control environment, and this is kind of commonly referred to as setting the tone at the top. Is management doing these things right that then help create the environment that all of the employees are doing these things right? Setting the organizational culture, ethical standards, and making sure those are communicated to employees. A couple examples that we have for these controls, the strategic direction, our personnel policy, and the union contract. All jobs have a job description that anybody can go find at any time on our shared drives. We have an organizational chart that defines those reporting lines. And then we have written policies and procedures, which are updated at minimum annually, usually during our financial statement audit. We'll go through and make sure that documentation is updated for any changes that occurred. And then risk assessment is the next one. And so this is essentially just identifying what risk areas we have, either related to fraud or related to those outcomes, financial outcomes. And this kind of helps, if we assess this risk ahead of time, then we don't have those pressures to then have to get this outcome at the last minute by committing fraud. So risk assessment is super important. A couple things that we do to try to get ahead of this and identify those risk areas is our annual budgeting process, monthly budget to actual results, both internally, we have meetings and forecasts, and then they're also presented to you monthly. We all tend to have a process improvement mentality everywhere, and specifically in my team, the finance department, we're always looking for process efficiencies, how we can do things better, more correct, etc. We take an annual training on industry best practices, what's happening in utilities, what are other companies doing that maybe we haven't thought of before, and those types of things, usually related to accounting and how they're reporting those things. And then the IRP is another one, and then the DRP for the EEU specifically.
I had a question there. Does all risk assessment live under you all, or is there separate risk assessment for things such as cyber, physical risk from climate, and, I'm trying to say, climate events,
everywhere. These are more focused on like the financial.
So it sits everywhere? Wait, say that again?
I think every department has their own risk assessment areas. These ones are more focused on like the finance and like how they relate to the financial statements, which cyber does, because.
Right. Sometimes that sits under finance, like enterprise risk management, so I was curious.
Yeah.
We also,
We have a risk register.
Yeah,
We get a copy from Belco, and so each area identified the highest risk with heat maps that go along with that. So and it's physical, cyber, financial, operational. So
So it's like an owned, shared.
although you have risk in your title.
oh yeah.
It's the risk
Congratulations.
guy.
Yes.
That means you're in charge of all risk.
Talking next.
All right, and so the first two that we just went over are kind of like setting the foundation, so kind of the prep work of what we will need to have for controls, which this next one that I'll go into are kind of the actual controls that we have. So control activities. So these are the things we're doing, policies and procedures that we have in place to make sure that those controls that we have are carried out properly and effectively to mitigate those risks, mitigate those opportunities for fraud, etc. And so this one is really focused on that opportunities area of the fraud triangle, making sure that we don't have the opportunities. So a good example here, the first one, segregation of duties. So one example that I wanted to share with you guys is cash handling. So we have both the cashiers and our accounting administrators doing the actual like recording of the cash daily. So either checks, cash, ACHs, kind of electronic payments. And then each day they will do the posting of those. And then our staff accountant, a separate person, reconciles that every day. So she's going through and making sure what was posted shows up in the bank. And if there's discrepancies, we're looking into those every single day to make sure we're on top of that. And then the third kind of review of that is each month, at the end of the month for all 30 to 31 days, I do a review over everything that happened in cash and then any outstanding balances that we have monthly. So kind of segregation of duties, so nobody can post that cash in our general ledger system and also have the access to that bank with the same cash. So it kind of gives the check and balance of cash. And a couple more here, again, written policies and procedures, those kind of show up in all the different components. Approvals is another example I was going to share with you guys. So we have approvals of almost everything that we do for finance. A purchase requisition goes through the supervisor's approval, and then it also comes up to the accountants to do an approval of like the actual accounting information, and then it also then goes to the purchasing department to do their approval to make sure the policies and procedures were followed before it even goes to a vendor. And then for invoices, our finance department receives those invoices, they go for approval from the person that initiated the purchase, and then before they get paid, the accountants review them to make sure that everything looks appropriate in the accounting world, and then they get paid, and then I do another review afterwards to make sure, again, the accounting is appropriate, but also make sure we followed our controls, that the approvals were received properly, we're not paying something 5 months too old, or anything like that, or we don't have the proper backup.
Good
Yeah.
question. Do you do that through workflow or do you do it as a manual exercise?
Currently, it's a manual exercise. Our system, our financial software system, is one that we're currently in the process of looking to upgrade, but it's very limited in how we can utilize the software for that. So it's very manual currently, but hopefully not for too long. Yeah. And then other examples that we have here is the finance reviews. Similarly to those approvals, we do reviews after everything's done, make sure things look right. That if it's not, we have to correct it, but at least we're finding those before things are published. And then again, monthly budget to actual results and forecasts internally and to you guys. And then system access controls, which is kind of like an IT control. Only the accountants are able to post things into the financial records.
Good question. Excuse me, on the software comment. Is there an overall, like a general timeline of your investigation for this kind of software upgrades? And
Yes, we've done for financial systems specifically, we've
Yes.
done demos with, I think, 3 vendors. We're currently doing some reference checks on our current front runner. And then in terms of timeline on implementation, that'll depend on the vendor's best practice approach. But I think our goal is no later than like July 1st, 2027 timeframe, depending on what the vendor thinks for timeline of implementation and then timing of implementation. And a few of the vendors have expressed not going live on the first day of a new fiscal year, so we might try to stagger that, but
thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
all right. And then, so this was the third one. This was like kind of the meat of the controls that we have. And then the last 2 are kind of, once those controls are in place, what are you doing to make sure that they're still working? How are you communicating those with your employees, making sure they're doing these correctly? So the next one's information and communication. So this is, how's information flowing throughout the organization? Are people being informed of changes to these controls? Are they being informed of the financial results timely, accurately? Do they have all the information they need to do their jobs and follow these controls properly? A couple of examples here. Some of them we've seen before. Obviously, the monthly budget to actual results. We share monthly financial statements internally with everybody. They're published on our shared drive, so anybody can grab them. Our annual audited financial statements and the presentation to you all that I will do next. And then job descriptions, I mentioned before, everybody has one and everybody knows where to find them. We have employee performance reviews that are done either semi-annually or annually, depending on the employee. And that kind of helps to give them feedback on how they're doing of their controls. Are they doing their job right, et cetera? Yeah.
Yeah, another question, it's not necessarily within finance, but across the company. Is there like a controls training or a controls like review that the whole company, the whole organization needs to go through? Just to understand like the purchasing and invoices and things that interact with other people in the company that's not the finance group. Is there some kind of controls training?
Yeah, we don't have a specific controls training, but it's something that we have on our list. We do a monthly lunch and learn with all employees, and that's something we have on our list to do, I think, in the early next year, kind of like a financial overview in general, with controls being one of them. But besides that, we have policies and procedures that people can go look through. But I think it would be a good idea to have like a full training, get everybody on the same page. And then the last one here, regular meetings. We have, like I have meetings with my direct reports, and then we have a full team meeting every week. And I think that's across the board with every department. And then we also have a weekly leadership meeting with all directors and supervisors. The executive team has their weekly meeting. So lots of meetings, and we're all continuing to communicate and collaborate. And then the last one here, monitoring. Are we making sure these are working? Do we need new ones? Do we have enough? Do we need to update the current ones? Examples, I think we've seen most of these on the other slides, but they all kind of relate everywhere. Process and procedures documentation. Like I said, these are updated at least annually, if not more often if we have a big process change. Ongoing review and training on new accounting standards. For my own CPA license, I need to have certain continuing education per year. And so those are all focused on like new accounting standards, updates to accounting standards, and what we can do better or different. And the annual financial statement audit, and again, the monthly budget to actual results. That's controls. Any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, and you're stuck with me again for the financial statement presentation. Did you all get a chance to look at them? I did print some out because I'm not going to show the statements themselves because I made some slides instead. So it might be easy for you to look through them on paper. So if you want them, I printed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep, and you have the full package, I think, in your emails. This is just the statement.
Thank you very much.
I'm just gonna switch windows. Okay. So, 3 big statements. Statements of net position, statements of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position, and the statement of cash flows. We'll go through each of them step by step. Feel free to stop me with any questions as I go. Statement of net position. This is commonly referred to as balance sheet. The statements of net position is kind of like a GASB title, and it's called the balance sheet. It has to balance. It's the biggest point of this one statement. This one shows kind of where we're at the end of the fiscal year. It's a point in time. It shows, excuse me, assets. So example, those are things that we own or are owed at the end of the year. Liabilities, opposite amounts that we owe. These are broken down by current and long term. So current is anything within the next 1 year, so within the next fiscal year, and long term is anything beyond that. And then we have net position, which is essentially an accumulation of all our historical net incomes from previous years. So 2 questions that I recall from last year's presentation that I think we'll touch on right now, because I made some nice photos for you. First question was, what do you do with the increase in net position? Where does it go since you aren't paying it to stockholders? And then the next question was, is it common for utilities to be so highly debt leveraged? So there we go. This first image here kind of shows our net position, which is the accumulation of all the historical net incomes, $68 million, and then our assets, $193 million. How do we get that to balance? Well, we add in our liabilities, and a lot of those liabilities, like we talked about last year, which brought up that question, is a lot of debt for those bonds, our general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. And the reason that we have to have all of those outstanding liabilities and those bonds and that debt is really to just support the assets that we have. If we didn't have those debts, we wouldn't be able to have as many assets. We wouldn't be able to do the capital projects that we do, increasing our infrastructure around town, all of those types of things. So essentially it supports our initiatives and allows us to have that asset balance continue to increase. All right, so page 1. Guys. We'll go through the statement of net position is 2 pages, first page being assets. So as you can see at the top, net capital assets increased $5.4 million. It's awesome. We're doing a lot of good work out there. I kind of broke it down to what makes up that $5.4 million and what's behind that. Thought it might be interesting for you guys to see kind of what we're doing and why that increased so much. So distribution assets increased $1.7 million. Our portion, BED's 50% portion of McNeil, increased $1.1 million. And then we also have this other category called construction work in progress or process, either or. It's called both. But that's all stuff that's currently ongoing, that's not yet finished or nearing being finished when the fiscal year was completed. That increased by $4.7 million. So big increase there. Kind of just goes to show all the things we've been doing recently. One of the biggest ones was the Winooski River Dam replacement, $2.6 million. ADMS replacement of $1 million. And then a couple of other smaller under $1 million projects going on as well.
Just a clarification.
Yes.
So the work's in progress, you haven't spent the capital money, or it's get the majority of the capital money is still on the balance sheet?
Yeah, we have spent the money. It's not currently considered an asset yet.
Oh, you're
so
in between, okay.
yeah,
between
so
assets, but
it's like a in limbo
Yep.
type asset.
Okay.
Yep. And so majority of this $5.4 million increase are things that are covered by our 2022 revenue bond funds. So you'll see on the same statement, the restricted investments deposits with bond trustees also went down $5.4 million. So you can kind of see that going from there up to the capital assets. And then other notable increase, we made an investment in our Velco equity of $577,000. So overall, our total assets and deferred outflows of resources was $193.7 million, up from last year of 193.3. So just a little bit of an increase there. Yeah, and then this next page here goes into a couple of assets that you don't typically maybe have heard of before, or you don't see these on outside of like utility financial statements. So the first being regulatory assets. So we have 5 of these, and what they are is basically an asset that's created for rate setting, cost recovery type purposes. So it's a PUC approved deviation from GAAP. So it's not under GAAP, but it's approved, so the auditors are a-okay with it. And this spreads expenses over multiple years. So if we have an expense in year 1, without adding this as a regulatory asset, it would hit those rates in year 2. But the asset kind of is in use for 4 years.
You recognize the cost, and if I understand it correctly, you recognize the cost and the revenue over a series of years.
Correct. Yep. So it's kind of spreading that out. So the customer in year 2 doesn't see that whole rate pressure. And if they leave in year 3, then they get that whole rate pressure. But the person that comes in their spot on year 3 doesn't have that amount in their rate, but they're getting the benefit of that asset or whatever it is that we needed to use a regulatory asset for. So it just allows us to spread that cost over to make it a little bit more equitable with how long those assets or items really help the company. And then deferred outflows of resources, this is specific to GASB, so it's a little bit different. But essentially it's an asset that's already been paid for, but expensed or consumed in a future period. So think of like a prepaid asset, but it's things such as like, you can see here, loss and advance refunding. That's more of an accounting thing when we refunded a bond back in the day, pension amounts and OPEB, which is a pension related thing. So essentially we have that as an asset, but it's not a true asset. It's just a deferred item. Questions on that part? Nope. All right. And then moving on to page 2 of the same statement. So this is liabilities and net position. Not a ton to report on this one. I think the biggest thing is our debt for bonds decreased $3 million. This is a combination of issuing one new general obligation bond, and then we also paid off about $6.2 million of principal in the fiscal year. So a net decrease of $3 million. And then regulatory liability. This is something new that was added to the financial statements in this fiscal year. I think it was a discussion with the auditors when they were here in October. But this is kind of the opposite of the regulatory asset. It's a regulatory liability that we're adding each year into the rates to collect funds for something we're doing in the future. So for this example, the McNeil overhaul is done, I think, every 7 years. So we're adding that into rates 1/7 at a time so that we have the funds to kind of pay for all, if not a portion of the overhaul when that happens in the future.
Question on that one?
Yes.
Is that a known and measurable cost? Is that why it's like, it's my understanding from previous discussions of rates is that it has to be cost, like actual hard known costs. So how can you do that when it's a cost 7 years in the future or 6 years in the future, perhaps?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so this one specifically, we're basing the 1/7 off of our last overhaul total. I forget what the exact total is, but and then if the cost of the next overhaul comes in lower, we'll have this regulatory liability to then kind of sit on our books a little bit until the next overhaul where we can offset the rest of it. And then if the next overhaul comes in higher, then that'll be an additional expense piece that we'll have to deal with, how we're going to treat that afterwards. Yep. Other questions? And then we have deferred inflows of resources. Again, kind of the opposite of the outflows. It's something that we've received that applies to a future reporting period, so we'd recognize the revenue at a later date or a later year. All right, then to the fun one. So this is the statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Again, common name for this is just the income statement. Couple highlights here. So it kind of shows what happened during the whole fiscal year. This is just a 12-month snapshot of what happened, how much revenue we received, and what areas our expenses incurred in. And just a note, the items listed here are not necessarily equitable to the cash that we received. So the next statement we'll go over is the cash flow statement, which shows how we have that, the change in cash. So we use accrual-based accounting, not cash-based accounting, and they're a little bit different. And so some of the things on here aren't cash-based, like the arrearages we've been discussing in the past. Those are recorded as revenue, but they're still outstanding as receivables on the balance sheet. So just one note there. All right, so income from operations, we had $750,000 in fiscal year 25. This is an increase. I think in fiscal year 24, we had an operating loss of $132,000, so really good increase there. Some of the makeup of this is our operating expenses increased $3 million. mostly related to purchase power, other power supply expense and transmission. That was 2.7 of the $3 million. But this was offset by a $3.2 million increase in sales to customers. So that is good. Let's see. Operating revenues in total increased 3.7 million compared to last year, and operating expenses increased 3 million. So let's see, net non-operating income. So under the operating income line, we have these items that are non-operating revenues and expenses. So these are items that are not directly related to the utility operations, running the business, getting power out to customers, but they're still very important to helping us run our business. So some examples of the in this fiscal year was 3.9 million, and some of the things that played into this: 4.5 of dividend income, and that's from that Belco investment that we get each year, and then grant income this year of 1.7 million. Excuse me, $1.3 million of this is for that Winooski Dam replacement that I mentioned on one of the first few slides. So reimbursement for that work. And then we have interest and amortization on debt, which is an expense of 3.2 million. So net of all of those items gets us to an operating income of 3.9. And then overall, a positive net income of 2.4 million for the year, which is a very strong metric for us. And then I've got a couple charts here, just showing operating revenues and the makeup. Stayed fairly consistent. I think it looks like 1% down in the commercial, 1% up in the residential, but overall pretty much the same makeup. And then similarly on the expense side, these are all the different categories. You can see that purchase power remains the largest, with changes being about 1% here and there, but overall pretty much the same proportionately. I think the biggest decrease was our administrative in general went from 12 to 10%, but not a big jump there. And then we get to the statement of cash flows. So this, like I said before, it's not completely the same as the income statement, but it's very similar. So you'll see a lot of the same captions in your lines there. And so what this is doing is essentially taking that income statement and telling you how much actual cash we received from those activities. The top is called the direct method, and this is showing you like actual cash receipts and actual payments that we made. And then the bottom is an indirect method reconciliation to the operating activities, and it's kind of like a backward way of getting to it, starting with the net income, operating income, and then reconciling changes in assets and liabilities to get you to the same amount. But that's where you'll see the same information on there twice. And highlights from here, we've got cash flow from operations of $7.9 million. So we received 67.5, and then we paid 59.6 million. Again, the highest captions here: purchase power, other power supply, and transmission expense. It's increased a little bit over $4 million this year for cash paid. And then we've got cash flow in capital and financing of $17.3 million. The biggest line item in there was an increase in acquisition and construction of capital assets of $3.2 million. Next one is cash flow from non-capital financing of $157,000. A big help in that line, again, is the grant income of $1.7 million this year. And then the last one there is cash flows from investing. So that had a $10.1 million cash provided to the department, interest and dividends of 5.2, and then we also had a cash outlay of that investment in Belco. And that's it. And then I also included in the packets that I just gave you, just the statements, the EEU statements. There's not a huge change in those year to year. They're a pretty small component of our overall statements, but I did want to just quickly go over them. I'll keep it short. The assets, cash and accounts receivable increased $823,000 this year. A lot of that is due to, we raised the rate of the EEC collecting rate in March 2025, and then we also had a little bit slightly higher revenues in the forward capacity market and the regional greenhouse gas initiatives auctions market for the year compared to last year. Liabilities, not too big of a jump, a little bit of an increase in accounts payable, or sorry, decrease in accounts payable, about $20,000, mainly just due to less activity this June than last June, because this is just based on the last month. And then the other statement for the EEU, unless there's questions on that one. Keep rolling. The other statement is kind of their income statement, revenues, expenses, etc. Increased revenues of $771,000, similarly to what I just mentioned, the increase in rates and then the different markets that we receive revenues from. Bless you. And then total expenses decreased $201,000, again, just mainly due to slightly lower activity in the year. And then a positive change in net position of $840,000. Any questions?
Questions from the commissioners?
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
This is really thorough. Appreciate it. Hey, Paul. Risk guy.
Thanks, Amanda. I thought 5 minutes.
Maybe
That was your
We
first
made
mistake.
You wanted to know. No. We made it 6. Let's see if we.
I will note this presentation was planned at the Board of Finance and he was on the consent agenda and did not get to present. So this is his first opportunity this fiscal year.
So I've added that time to this presentation.
Oh, no.
No. Okay, good evening. Should I wait for? So this is the annual presentation of our property, boiler, and machinery insurance, which is by far our largest line. We've got close to 20 lines of insurance. Some we share with the city. Those are all under 100,000. This is a big beast. So for many reasons, we come before you each year to get approval. Just the scheduling, we went November 3rd to the Board of Finance, and just the way that the meetings line up, we come to you tonight, and then we're on perhaps consent agenda for the 17th with the City Council. So once we get through those three, that's when we hope to bind this coverage, effective November 20th. Okay, so this is our property, boiler, and machinery. Let's see if I can move this whole thing off to the side. Lost that, so we'll share again. Okay. So the recommendation is that, again, the three entities I just mentioned, that we authorize to renew this policy. We have 4 different carriers that make up this line of insurance. Typically, you have one line of insurance, like whether it's your homeowners or your auto, and you have one carrier. The uniqueness of our property, and particularly a generating station, is that last many years, we have 4 different carriers that together make up and share if we had any losses, which we haven't had any. But it's just the nature of a generation station, a biomass plant, that's very unique. And so it makes some of the pricing difficult or interesting. So at the end of tonight, we'll be asking for your approval to bind this coverage, which again is effective November 20th of 25 through 26. It's a 1-year policy for a not to exceed premium of $718,024.29. And what that means is our carrier, which is Hickok and Boardman, and they've had a recent name change, been in business for 150 years. If you go by their building, Acrisure is the insurance agent, but you'll hear me refer to them as Hickok and Boardman many times tonight. So the not to exceed, they go right up to the November 20th or even beyond. We never let that coverage lapse. It's too important. So we'll bind coverage at this price, not to exceed, and fingers crossed, sometimes it comes in below. It'll never exceed it. So what does this cover? So again, a repeat to some of the existing commissioners and news to the new commissioners. This property, boiler, machinery covers all our physical assets. Perils from such as fire, lightning, smoke, explosions, storms, burst pipes, all that stuff, theft and vandalism. and it's designed to protect our tangible property, something you can put your hands on, okay? So the building, the boilers, specifically our transformers and property inside and outside. Computers, fences, office equipment, everything, the tables you're sitting at now. Again, as I mentioned, that line of insurance expires on November 20th. Last year, again, I just mentioned that because this usually happens. We come to you, we want to bind with a not to exceed. Although it may not seem minor, and someone in this room says we're not really saving money unless it comes in lower than our existing premium. So we ultimately bound this coverage last year for $709,000, and so we quote saved $6,751. Doesn't sound like much, but just to know that we always stick to, we not to exceed that amount. If that happened, we would come back to you and revisit the whole operation. Again, our insurance agent, Hickok and Boardman, follow along with the slides here. Hickok and Boardman, AccuSure, they work, this starts in the spring. It takes a long time, so it doesn't sneak up on us. It's such a large line. They work diligently with our 4 carriers to try to come up with the best price, the best limits, the best terms, conditions, and so on. We have what's called a total insurable value, and that's nothing more than the total cost of all our property. So you can imagine, particularly, we're here at Pine Street, 3 miles away. We've got the McNeil Station, Windusquin Hydro, and so on, the gas turbine plant at 1 Lake Street, if you will. So all those properties together, whether our substations, make up our total insurable value. So the renewable premium, again, not to exceed amount, is anticipated to increase from last year's amount with a not to exceed amount. And our insurance agent has shared there's going to be last minute changes. So fingers crossed, we might come in a little bit lower. And so that'll be happening sometime between now and November 20th. I already talked about total insurable value. Some of the things, what is our insurance agent? And the distinction is an agent versus broker. It sounds the same, but they're actually a little bit different. That the agent works for or tries to place business the best, which helps us out as the insured. Whereas an insurance broker, which used to have for many years, works exclusively for us as a client. So they're both looking out for interest, but that's what the difference between an insurance broker and an agent. So we have gone and through them. 2 years ago, we had a very large and a lengthy process of looking at other quotes from not just carriers, but captives. And if you know anything about the captive market, Vermont for many years was third behind Bermuda and the Cayman Islands. As of last year, we're the #1 state in the world as far as placing captive insurance. So right now, it's not a good fit for us, but we're always looking into that. Captive in general means you're insuring your parent company's risk and exposures. So there's a lot of startup fees of that, legal fees that go along with it, different phase like an environmental assessment and so on. So we're not there yet. We're always looking at ways if that makes sense for us. To help offset the increase in our total insurable value, because it typically goes up for inflation reasons, if nothing else, or if we add different equipment or buildings, our carrier or the agent negotiates with those 4 carriers to try to say, hey, you've got this dollar amount of total insurance values. We don't have to insure all of it because it's at different locations. It'd be a pretty rare event that here at 585 Pine Street, particularly say a fire that would impact us as well as the McNeil Station or our substation stuff. So they negotiate, it's months of back and forth and say, okay, we're willing to write this or underwrite this. And that helps lower our price as the total amount that we have to insure. Some of the things, particularly at McNeil, because that makes up about 73% of this line of insurance. And from the underwriting perspective, that's the highest risk, of course, versus just here as a building. We're always looking at deductible changes. So years ago, we had, not that many years ago, we had $500,000 for a turbine, and that's raised to $1 million. We've moved to $2 million now, and even this year, we're looking to move to $3 million or higher. Up to $10 million. So in the next 10, 15 days, we'll get different prices on that, whether we want to make that, if it makes sense. Somewhere there's that fine line where that balancing line is, okay? But those are things we're looking at, what we call a valuation change. And it's like actual cash value, won't bore you with all the stuff, versus replacement costs. If you did have a loss, what would be covered? Right now, all our properties on replacement costs except our rail cars. We have 21 rail cars in the system. Those are on what we call an actual cash value. Very hard to replace. They're very unique. Their size and the weight and coming across the rails. So that's our only property currently that's on what we call an ACV. Deductible changes at Windows Wind Hydro and the GT. We're looking at options to increase that deductible from $1 million to $2 million. Let's see, we also, again, we work with the city on many lines of insurance. We obviously are a city of department. Workers' comp and auto, we already share lines with them. We share lines on an environmental basis for spills and that stuff. So we're always looking to weigh when it makes sense for both entities. We're not going to hurt BD and we're not going to hurt the city. So when our agent can find a line of insurance or carrier that's willing to write something that's together, then we'll consider that. They looked at, Hickok and Boardman, or Acrisure, looked at moving our workers' comp and auto lines from Travelers to Liberty Mutual in July, but they had higher deductibles, and again, it just wasn't in our favor, so we didn't pursue that. The cyber, I know you mentioned cyber before, that is a very, not just unique risk, but highest on the risk manager's charts, if you will, and they looked at consolidating with the city on this line of coverage this year. But the governmental class of business, it means it has a higher minimum deductible than we already carry. We're at $3 million with a $25,000 deductible. And finally, H&B asked us to consider what we call, I mentioned this total insurable value, a valuation basis. So just like if you had an asset appraiser come through your house, looked at your property, we are looking to prices to what that might cost for us to do that. We use what's called the Handy-Whitman Index, which is an industry standard for evaluating your property. And if you bring in a third party to say, is what's on your books really too high? Is that really accurate? And we'll look into that too. So all these different options that it's really not just at the time of renewal, they're doing it around the clock, particularly for this line of insurance. It's so important and it's so expensive. Okay, so down to the number crunching, on impact on budgets. This line of insurance, as I mentioned, renews on November 20th. So if you can imagine, obviously we're on a fiscal year. So from July to November, we've got like 5 months at one rate, and then we'll get a new premium, typically goes up, and we'll have 7 months at a different rate. So it's that combination of 5 months at the old rate, 7 months at new rate, and that's where you get the budget number. So our fiscal year 26 budget amount was $742,956. We do that in January of each year. And as I mentioned, five months at the old rate and 7 at the projected rate. So we had a $767,041. That's what's in our fiscal year budget. So you can compare that to the not to exceed amount, and it is considered a savings and or reduction. Some could argue that I'm over budgeting. I'd like to think that's not the case, but that number is made up of two components. One is a rate case. So we work with Hickok and Boardman, and we project in this year a 5% rate increase. And then we also project the second part of that is how much do we think that TIV, that total insurable value, is going to go up? And we estimated usually between 2 and 3%. I work closely with the finance department. Are we getting new equipment? What's phasing out? And also inflation factors. So that's where the difference comes from what I had budgeted at 767 versus this not to exceed. Okay, moving along. Impact on budget, I talked about that. The not to exceed amount of 718 would amount to a 6.39% reduction in what I had estimated at renewal, which is good. And again, to Darren's point, although not lower than our current premium, very close, 1.24%. Given inflation, as you know, is around 3%, I think I consider that a win. And again, not quite finalized. There's still a chance that will come in lower, not higher, but lower. So we're getting close. And the last line here, the not to exceed amount of 718,024 would be a 3.8% decrease in our total budget, like I mentioned before. And there's the numbers I've already mentioned already. So before, I've got, yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
To get to lower rates, going with a potentially higher deductible, how often in the past has BED actually made claims against the insurance?
On this line of insurance, not since I've been here in 32 years, which is great.
Never made it.
Nothing. We've had some minor losses in other lines, but nothing this. That plan is well maintained. We do put a lot of investment money into repairing.
Very low risk to increase.
Very low risk. It's just the analogy I like to use: why is a 16-year-old neighbor, typically a male, is driving the red Ferrari, insurance rate so high? Because that class has an exposure nationwide, and so the underwriters for the insurance companies, better or not, they're in it for make money. That's what insurance companies, they protect you, but it's a business. And so if there is a biomass plant out west that has a loss and it's $200 million, that's going to impact us. Good question.
And that, I mean, maybe follow on. I saw the big increase in like 2018. What was the history of that?
I remember that distinctly.
Yeah.
Great question. So I know time is of the issue, but there is a chart of the last 20 plus years of history that's hard to read. So my new chart this year, I was trying to there it is. So there's a spike you were talking about. Okay. So anticipating you'd ask that. So you hear the term hard market. What does that mean? So as you can see over all these years, we've clipped along between a little over close to 200,000, all of a sudden bang, 2019. I like to think we're flattening the curve a little bit if you last 6 or 7 years, but particularly in that year of 2019, it was a shock to all of us, including our insurance broker. Hard market, inflation, catastrophes, investment income, capacity, how much you're willing to write, the loss experience across the nation, reinsurance, and competition. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Those 7 factors
It was a really
spiked.
bad year.
A really bad year and
My
a shock.
first year as general manager. So
And in fairness to our insurance, we learned that about a month and a half before that policy renewal. So that was a real heart attack. That's the only slide I was going to share.
we've had to do quite a bit of work just to moderate the increases since then. You know, a bunch of implementation of engineering recommendations, et cetera. It's a very tough market.
It sounds like sharpening pencil to keep that
Yeah,
at bay.
Yeah,
that's right.
there's a lot of work goes behind the scenes and a lot that, we do pay a small fee to Hickok and Boardman and this is what they work on, not exclusively, but this is where their hard work pays off. It is a difficult line of insurance.
I think it was around that time we ended up having multiple carriers because didn't we have the carrier issue where I think we previously had much of our coverage with a single carrier for some of the
Yeah, we were a single
property
carrier and,
Yeah.
and we often go out to bids, but again, it's not like you're shopping. They say, you don't like the price of your car, you go down the street and maybe get a breaker from, that is not the case when you're talking about exposure this large and this unique.
Right.
So there's only a certain few players that even want to write the business, so.
So I mean, as I see it, you're parceled out the risk.
Yeah, so you
That's right.
either go without insurance, which we would never do, or you find the best price possible with the best. These are all A-rated companies and been around forever, so. So anyways, that's really cognizant of time. Any more questions you might have? Otherwise, I do have the resolution there for you to vote on.
Any other questions? Someone,
Good work to, what's his name? Plunkett, the guy that.
Yeah, Paul's actually
Paul-
retired, but
That was Paul doing it?
yeah, Amy Merritt, Ian Sutherland do all the work on this.
and this is the language you want to use for the vote.
No, I think you have a good job keeping, just a several $1,000s increases, or whatever, that is, compared
Yeah.
to what we've seen in the past, that's.
Yeah, it's flattening, but
Really
it's a
keeping it.
huge number still, but it's heading in the right direction. We won't see 200,000 again in my lifetime. Not gonna happen.
Do we have a motion on the to vote?
Sure. I would move to authorize the general manager of Burlington Electric Department or their designee to execute the property boiler and machinery insurance coverage renewal contract with AIG Zurich Star Tech Aegis for the policy period 11/2025 through 11/2026 with a not to exceed premium of $718,024 as outlined by this memo, subject to review and approval by the city attorney's office, the city CAO, Board of Finance, and City Council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any, I'm sorry, tired,
Opposed?
objection or opposed? Any discussion on the motion? Okay, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. All right. And lastly, coming at the end, we have a commissioner's check-in. Do commissioners have any comments or things they want to bring up at the commissioner's check-in?
I would just once again want to welcome Brian to the commission and strongly suggest to him to spend some time with some of these guys here. Get a chance, maybe that if you haven't already, get a chance go out and visit McNeil. Go to McNeil. Go to Winooski 1. Go up to Highgate. Go see some of these assets with these folks and really get I did that. It gave me a real tangible understand it. All these things we talk about kind of brings it to life when you've actually been to some of these places, and these folks are more than happy to.
Engineer by training, so.
So I think you'd find it
eager to see
fascinating, and I know all these folks are more than happy to share their expertise and knowledge with you. So once again, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? All right.
Move to adjourn.
We got
I'll second.
second. All right. We are adjourned.
All right.
Seven.
There we go.